In the final seconds before Mackenzie Shirilla's Toyota Camry hit the Plidco Building in Strongsville, Ohio, the car recorded what no living person in that vehicle could fully explain. The accelerator was pushed all the way down. The brake was not used. The speed was near 100 miles per hour. Dominic, Russo, and Davion Flanagan were inside with her. They did not make it out alive, but Mackenzie did. Netflix's The Crash gives Mackenzie Shirilla the chance to speak from prison. She says she does not remember the crash. She says she did not mean to kill anyone. But before any interview, before any public debate, before anyone argued over intent, the Toyota Camry had already saved its own version of the final seconds. And that version pulled investigators away from a normal, deadly crash. Please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases for more true crime cases, investigations, and public safety stories that deserve real attention. Watch till the end, because the detail that changes this case may not be the one most people noticed first. It was early on July 31, 2022, in Strongsville, Ohio. Mackenzie Shirilla was 17 years old. Dominic Russo was 20. Davion Flanagan was 19. All three had been together through the night. By the time the Toyota Camry reached Progress Drive, it was no longer just another car moving through a quiet industrial area before sunrise. Progress Drive was not a freeway. It was not a long open highway where a driver might lose track of speed. It was a road near businesses, signs, buildings, and intersections. One of those buildings was the Plidco Building, close to Progress Drive and Alameda Drive. That building became the place where the drive ended. Mackenzie was behind the wheel. Dominic Russo was in the vehicle with her. He was not just another passenger. He was her boyfriend, and his relationship with Mackenzie would later become one of the reasons investigators looked beyond speed alone. Davion Flanagan was also inside. He was their friend, and his name would later get pushed too far into the background whenever people talked only about Mackenzie and Dominic. The car turned onto Progress Drive from Pearl Road. From there, prosecutors said the Toyota accelerated hard. It moved down the road at a speed far beyond what belonged in that area. The car went through a business sign and struck the Plidco Building with enough force to kill Dominic and Davion at the scene. Mackenzie survived. She was taken for medical care. At that first moment, the police did not have a murder conviction, a Netflix documentary, or a prison interview. They had a destroyed car, 2 dead young men, 1 injured driver, and a road that did not match the speed. The crash was discovered after the impact, not while it was happening. According to the official release, a Good Samaritan came across the scene about 45 minutes later and called police. That delay added another layer to the early response. Dominic and Davion were already beyond help when first responders arrived. Mackenzie was the only person from the car still alive. For investigators, the first question was basic. What caused the Toyota to hit that building? A deadly crash can come from many things. A driver can fall asleep. A driver can be impaired. A driver can lose control. A car can have a mechanical failure. A medical event can happen behind the wheel. A mistake can turn fatal in seconds. But the physical evidence did not let police stop at tragic accident. The Toyota's event data recorder became one of the first major pieces of evidence. That device captured the car's behavior in the final seconds before impact. It did not show fear. It did not show memory. It did not show an argument inside the vehicle. It showed inputs, speed, acceleration, braking, steering, movement. The data showed the accelerator pedal was fully pressed before the crash. It also showed the brake was not applied. The car was traveling close to 100 miles per hour. Those numbers gave investigators a reason to slow down and rebuild the drive instead of closing the file as a terrible wreck. A car can crash by mistake. But a car moving near 100 miles per hour on Progress Drive, with the accelerator down and no brake use recorded before impact, created a different problem. Police had to ask whether the driver lost control, or whether the driver kept control long enough to aim the car toward the building. The vehicle was also examined for defects. That step was necessary because a stuck accelerator, failed brakes, or steering failure could explain a crash without turning the driver's actions into a deliberate act. A mechanical review did not find a defect that explained the crash. There was no confirmed failure in the brakes, accelerator, or steering system that caused the Toyota to speed into the building. That finding changed the direction of the investigation. If the car did not fail, the focus came back to the person driving it. Mackenzie Shirilla was the only person behind the wheel. Dominic and Davion were passengers. They could not tell police what happened in the last seconds. The Toyota's data became the closest thing investigators had to a witness inside the car. Netflix's documentary gives weight to Mackenzie's claim that she does not remember. That claim belongs in the case because she survived and continued to deny intent. But the first evidence did not depend on what Mackenzie remembered. It came from the car, the road, the building, and the crash reconstruction. The road also worked against the idea of a simple accident. Progress Drive was not a road where that speed made sense. The Toyota did not just drift off a lane at normal speed. It traveled fast enough to go through a sign and into a building. The distance, the speed, and the lack of braking gave prosecutors a reason to argue the vehicle had not simply slipped out of control. The investigation moved from the scene to the data. Officers and reconstruction experts had to work backward from the building. They looked at where the car came from, how it entered Progress Drive, how fast it was moving, and what the driver did before impact. Every answer tightened the focus on the final seconds. The black box did not give a full movie of the crash. It captured only a short window before impact. That limit gave the defense room to argue uncertainty. It could not show what anyone said in the car. It could not show whether Dominic or Davion reacted. It could not show whether Mackenzie felt sick, panicked, or confused earlier in the drive. But the short window it did capture was damaging. Full acceleration, no brake, near 100 miles per hour, no confirmed vehicle defect, a road that did not fit that speed, a building directly ahead. At first, police were facing a crash. After the data came in, they were facing a possible crime. The difference came from evidence, not public anger. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were dead. Mackenzie Shirilla was alive. The vehicle showed acceleration instead of braking. The mechanical inspection did not give police an innocent machine failure to blame. That is why the first section of this case has to begin with the Toyota Camry, not the prison interview. The Netflix version starts with the human conflict because that is what makes people watch. The legal case started with the physical record because that is what prosecutors had to prove. Mackenzie could say she did not remember. Her defense could later point to a possible medical emergency. Her family could believe she never meant to hurt anyone, but investigators still had to answer what the car did on Progress Drive before it hit the Plidco Building. The answer they found was not soft. The car accelerated. The car did not brake. The car reached a speed that did not belong on that road. 2 young men died at the scene. The only survivor was the driver. That evidence did not finish the case by itself. It did not explain motive. It did not answer every question about what happened inside the Toyota. It did not prove every thought in Mackenzie's mind, but it gave police the reason to keep digging. And once they kept digging, the crash stopped looking like a single terrible moment. It became a murder investigation built around speed, control, silence, and the last data the Toyota recorded before Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan were gone. After the crash, Mackenzie Shirilla gave the answer that would follow the case for years. She said she did not remember what happened on Progress Drive. She said she did not remember driving into the Plidco Building. She did not describe a final argument, a last-second panic, or a clear decision behind the wheel. Her account left a blank space where Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan could no longer speak. That blank space became the opening for her defense. Mackenzie's side pointed to a medical condition called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. It had been in her life before the crash. Her family said it could make her lightheaded. In Netflix's The Crash, Mackenzie points toward that condition and the possibility that something happened to her body before the Toyota hit the building. The medical claim gave the crash a different frame. If Mackenzie blacked out, then the final seconds would not be murder. They would be a medical emergency behind the wheel. A young driver, 2 passengers, a road before sunrise, and a body that failed without warning. That was the cleanest path for the defense. Prosecutors did not accept it. They answered with the car's data. The Toyota did not show braking before impact. It showed acceleration. It showed speed near 100 miles per hour. A mechanical review did not find a vehicle defect that explained the crash. The state argued that a blackout did not fit the way the car moved down Progress Drive. The medical testimony did not give Mackenzie a clean escape from the physical evidence. Some testimony allowed the possibility that a medical event could occur and leave little behind by the time doctors examined her. But possibility was not enough. The state pushed the court toward the final seconds. The accelerator down, no brake use, the speed climbing, the car continuing into the building. That is where Netflix's version can feel too thin. Mackenzie's memory claim is powerful because she is alive to say it. The 2 people who died cannot answer it. Dominic Russo cannot say what happened inside the Toyota. Davion Flanagan cannot say whether there was panic, silence, yelling, or any warning before impact. The car's data became the only clear record from those final seconds. The medical explanation also ran into a second problem, the relationship between Mackenzie and Dominic. Prosecutors were not only looking at a car. They were looking at what had been happening before the crash. Dominic was Mackenzie's boyfriend, and testimony showed the relationship had been under pressure before July 31, 2022. Dominic's brother, Angelo Russo, told detectives that Dominic had been trying to break up with Mackenzie during July. That gave prosecutors a motive theory. They argued the crash did not happen in an empty emotional space. It came after conflict, strain, and attempts by Dominic to leave the relationship. Other witnesses gave different pictures of the relationship. Some people said Mackenzie and Dominic seemed close. Some described love between them. Others described fighting, control, jealousy, and breakups. The trial did not present a simple teenage romance. It presented a relationship that prosecutors said had reached a dangerous point before the Toyota reached Progress Drive. One piece of testimony became especially serious. Christopher Martin, a friend connected to Dominic's family, testified about an incident before the fatal crash. He said he heard Mackenzie threaten to crash the car while she and Dominic were inside. According to that testimony, Dominic got out of Mackenzie's car and left with him. That testimony was not a recording. It was not a written confession. Martin also did not report it to police when it allegedly happened. The defense could attack that, but prosecutors used it because the alleged threat sounded too close to what later happened on July 31. A threat to crash with Dominic inside became harder to ignore after Dominic died in Mackenzie's car. Netflix's The Crash gives space to Mackenzie's denial and her medical explanation. The stronger missing layer is how prosecutors connected the relationship evidence to the vehicle evidence. They did not have to prove that every argument led to violence. They had to show intent through conduct. The prior threat testimony, the breakup information, and the crash data gave them a chain to put in front of the judge. The July 28 location issue added another piece. Detective Zachy Hazu testified that GPS data from Mackenzie's phone placed her near the area of Progress Drive and Alameda Drive 3 days before the crash. Prosecutors treated that as possible preparation. Some later coverage described it as a possible dry run. That claim needed limits. Phone GPS is not perfect. A location ping can place someone in a general area without proving an exact path or exact stop. Detective Jesus acknowledged that on cross-examination. The defense could argue the July 28 data was too loose to prove planning. But the state did not use the July 28 data alone. It was placed beside the route, the speed, the full acceleration, the lack of braking, and the prior relationship conflict. Prosecutors argued that Mackenzie had been near the same area days earlier, then returned before dawn with Dominic and Davion in the car. That gave the route more weight. Progress Drive was not presented as a random wrong turn. Prosecutors argued it was an obscure road Mackenzie had some connection to before the crash. The judge later viewed locations along the route herself, instead of relying only on descriptions from the courtroom. The hospital audio added another problem for Mackenzie's side after the crash. Later reporting said Detective Jesus recorded audio at the hospital while Mackenzie was with her mother. Prosecutor Tim Troop said Mackenzie spoke in a distorted way, and he believes she may have been asking whether they could tell police she had a seizure. The same reporting said Mackenzie asked whether police could just take her license away for 10 years. That audio was not a confession. It did not contain Mackenzie clearly saying she planned the crash. It did not erase the need for vehicle data, witness testimony, or medical evidence. But it gave prosecutors another reason to challenge the blackout explanation. If a seizure explanation was being discussed right after the crash, the state could argue it looked less like a discovered medical answer and more like a defense being shaped. There was also public confusion over Mackenzie's condition after the crash. Christine Russo, Dominic's sister, later challenged the idea that Mackenzie had been unconscious for days. Mackenzie was unconscious when first responders found her, but later reporting said documentation did not support the claim that she remained unconscious for days. The legal record also placed Detective Jesus with Mackenzie at the hospital when she was conscious. For Dominic's family, that difference was not small. They were grieving Dominic while also hearing explanations for why Mackenzie survived and why she said she could not remember. Any confusion about her condition after the crash fed the family's belief that the public was not hearing the full case. Davion Flanagan also needed more space than he received in much of the public conversation. The legal case involved 2 deaths, not 1. Dominic's relationship with Mackenzie became central because prosecutors believed it helped explain motive. But Davion was not a side name attached to someone else's conflict. Davion was 19. He had friends tracking his location because of Life 360. His friend Tyler Croy gave police the screenshot that helped establish the early morning timeline. Davion's phone movement helped place the group at Brushwood Lane until about 5:30 a.m., then on the road until the crash at about 5:36 a.m. His family had to watch the case become heavily focused on Mackenzie and Dominic. That focus came from the motive theory, but it still left Davion at risk of being treated as the extra person in the car. He was not extra. His death carried the same legal weight. Mackenzie was convicted in connection with both Dominic and Davion. Later coverage also noted that Davion's family created a memorial scholarship in his name. That detail brings him back from the edge of the public discussion. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a young man with a life beyond one terrible drive in Strongsville. If you are still watching, subscribe and like the video. Then drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the full truth has been told, or is there still something missing? The medical examiner's change also belongs in this section because it shows how the case moved from crash to homicide. At first, the deaths of Dominic and Davion were listed as accidental. Later, after more material from the police investigation was reviewed, the manner of death was changed to homicide. That change did not create the entire case by itself. The conviction did not rest only on a revised medical examiner form, but the change showed how much the investigation had shifted. Police were no longer treating the crash only as a traffic tragedy. They had gathered enough evidence for prosecutors to argue that Dominic and Davion were killed through an intentional act. Netflix's The Crash carries the emotional force of Mackenzie speaking from prison. It lets her say she never meant for Dominic and Davion to die. It lets her explain the blank in her memory. But the trial did not turn on emotion alone. Prosecutors challenged the medical claim with Toyota's data. They challenged the accident theory with relationship testimony. They challenged randomness with the July 28 location evidence. They challenged the clean blackout explanation with the hospital audio. None of those details stands alone as the whole case. Together, they gave prosecutors a path from uncertainty to intent. The crash was no longer just a car hitting a building before sunrise. It became a chain of evidence, a strained relationship, an alleged prior crash threat, a route tied to earlier phone data, a surviving driver who claimed no memory, and a vehicle that recorded full acceleration instead of braking. That is what Netflix did not fully hold in front of the audience. Not one secret clue, not one dramatic missing confession. The missing weight was the full chain that made the court treat the crash as murder. Mackenzie Shirilla was not arrested the morning of the crash. At first, police had a fatal collision, one surviving driver and 2 young men dead at the scene. The criminal case came after investigators gathered the car data, the phone information, the relationship testimony, the medical reports, and the crash reconstruction. On November 4, 2022, Mackenzie was arrested. By then, the state was no longer treating the crash on Progress Drive as a tragic loss of control. Prosecutors alleged she had purposely driven the Toyota Camry into the Plidco Building with Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan inside. Because Mackenzie was 17 when the crash happened, the case first had to pass through juvenile court. A juvenile court judge reviewed the evidence and found probable cause on several serious charges. The case was then transferred to adult court, where Mackenzie faced the full weight of Ohio's criminal system. The grand jury indictment was not small. Mackenzie was charged with 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide, 1 count of drug possession, and 1 count of possessing criminal tools. The murder charges made the state's position clear. Prosecutors were not arguing only speed, recklessness, or teenage stupidity. They were arguing purpose. The trial began in August 2023. Mackenzie did not have a jury decide the case. She chose a bench trial. That put the decision in the hands of Judge Nancy Margaret Russo, who heard the witnesses, reviewed the physical evidence, considered the defense claims, and decided guilt herself. The prosecution's case returned again and again to the Toyota. The event data recorder showed full acceleration before impact. It showed no brake use. The car reached a speed close to 100 miles per hour. A mechanical inspection did not find a brake failure, steering failure, or accelerator defect that explained the crash. The state used that data to argue that the car did what Mackenzie made it do. Crash reconstruction also gave the court a sequence. The Toyota turned from Pearl Road onto Progress Drive. It accelerated down an industrial road before sunrise. It went through a business sign and struck the Plidco Building. The path gave prosecutors a physical map. The car was not drifting slowly into danger. It was gaining speed toward it. The defense pushed back with the medical claim. Mackenzie's side argued that POTS, memory loss, or a sudden medical event could explain what happened. The defense also pointed to uncertainty in the final seconds, including steering movement and gearshift movement inside the car. If something happened medically, or if someone inside the vehicle tried to intervene, then the final data could be interpreted differently. The court heard evidence that helped the defense. Some witnesses did not describe a fight between Mackenzie and Dominic that night. Some testimony allowed that a medical event can happen and leave little obvious proof by the time a patient is examined. The black box only captured a short window before impact. not the entire drive from Brushwood Lane to Progress Drive. But the prosecution had the heavier chain, full accelerator, no brake, high speed, no confirmed mechanical failure, prior relationship conflict. Dominic reportedly trying to break up with Mackenzie, testimony that Mackenzie had previously threatened to crash a car with Dominic inside, phone location evidence placing her near the crash area days earlier. The state did not rely on one piece. It stacked the pieces together. Judge Russo also viewed locations tied to the route. That gave the court a direct look at the road, the area, and the building. Progress Drive was not treated as a random line on a map. It became a physical route the judge could connect to the speed, the timing, and the impact. The defense tried to raise doubt around the July 28 GPS location. Detective Zaki Hazu acknowledged that phone location data can give a general area, not an exact pinpoint. That gave Mackenzie's side room to argue the state was stretching the meaning of the data. But the judge did not look at the phone evidence alone. It was weighed with the crash data, witness testimony, and route evidence. The prior threat testimony also faced attack. Christopher Martin did not report the alleged threat when it happened. The defense could argue memory, timing, and credibility. But the testimony still placed a serious statement in front of the court. Mackenzie had allegedly threatened to crash while Dominic was inside the car before the fatal crash ever happened. The medical examiner's decision also changed as more investigative material came in. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan's deaths were first listed as accidental. After the prosecutor's office sent additional investigation material, the manner of death was changed to homicide. The defense challenged the weight of that change, but the court had other evidence to consider beyond the medical examiner's updated classification. When Judge Russo delivered the verdict, she did not frame the crash as a medical blackout. She did not accept it as a simple accident. She found Mackenzie guilty on all 12 counts. The judge's language focused on intent. She described Mackenzie's actions as controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. She pointed to the route, the speed, the early hour, the car aimed toward the building, and the lack of braking. The ruling turned the crash into a murder conviction. The court did not have to know every private thought inside Mackenzie's head. The court relied on what could be proved from the outside. The vehicle's data, the road, the witnesses, the medical testimony, the phone information, and the way the car moved before impact. At sentencing, Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan's families had to face Mackenzie in court. They were no longer waiting for investigators to decide what happened. They were hearing the punishment for the deaths of two young men who had been passengers in a car Mackenzie controlled. Mackenzie was sentenced to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years. The court ordered two 15 years to life sentences to run at the same time. She also received penalties tied to the drug possession and criminal tools counts, and her driver's license was suspended for life. The sentence did not mean she would never have a parole hearing. It meant Ohio had legally classified the crash as murder and required Mackenzie to serve at least 15 years before she could ask for release. Mackenzie continued to deny that she intended to kill Dominic Russo or Davion Flanagan. In Netflix's The Crash, she repeats that position from prison. She says she does not remember the crash. She says she did not mean for anyone to die. She points back to the possibility of a medical emergency. But the trial had already answered that claim in court. The judge heard the POTS argument. The judge heard the uncertainty around the final seconds. The judge heard the defense theory. Then the judge accepted the prosecution's explanation instead. The appeal came next. Mackenzie challenged the convictions in Ohio's 8th District Court of Appeals. Her side argued that the state had not proved purposeful intent, that the evidence did not support the verdict, and that legal errors affected the case. In September 2024, the appeals court affirmed the convictions. The appellate ruling did not retry the emotion of the case. It reviewed the legal record and found enough evidence for the convictions to stand. The appeal focused heavily on the same question that sits under the Netflix documentary. Did the evidence support a finding that Mackenzie purposely crashed the car? The appeals court said yes. It pointed to the prior threat testimony, the controlled turn onto Progress Drive, the full acceleration, the speed, the lack of braking, the manual gearshift movement, the route into the building, and the lack of medical or mechanical proof that explained the crash as an accident. That ruling kept the conviction in place. The public could continue arguing. Mackenzie could continue denying intent. Netflix could give her a platform to explain herself. But legally, the murder conviction survived review. A later post-conviction effort also failed after timing problems with the filing. That left Mackenzie still convicted, still serving her sentence, and still publicly maintaining that she did not mean to kill Dominic and Davion. The final conflict is plain. Mackenzie says there was no intent. The court found intent beyond a reasonable doubt. Netflix presents her voice, her memory gap, and her medical explanation. The trial and appeal point back to the evidence. The crash was not treated as murder because people were angry. It was treated as murder because the car data, route, testimony, medical evidence, and legal findings pointed in the same direction. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan died in a Toyota Camry on Progress Drive. Mackenzie Shirilla survived and later said she could not remember what happened. The Toyota recorded acceleration instead of braking. The state built a murder case from that record, from the route, from the relationship evidence, from the medical disputes, and from the testimony heard in court. Netflix's The Crash gave Mackenzie Shirilla a voice from prison. The court relied on the car data, the route, the testimony, the medical evidence, and the legal findings. That is what the documentary did not fully convey to people. The question was never only whether Mackenzie sounded sorry. The question was what the evidence proved after Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan could no longer speak. Thanks for watching till the end. Subscribe to U.S. crime cases, like the video, and share your thoughts below. Then watch another case from the channel.